Facts about slavery never mentioned in school. Thomas Sowell. Sowell. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Now look, as I think about it, in high school, nothing, zero, not a zip zilt was mentioned anything about any type of slavery in high school that I can recall, in school in general. But I know a lot of things on slavery. I've seen a lot of movies. A lot of times movies don't get it right. You know, they might be looking from just a certain perspective. But we're going to check this out. I see this is a popular video in the reaction world. We're going to see what this is about, man. Again, this is my first time checking this Thomas Sowell out, so I don't know what's going to happen with this video. Hopefully everything goes smoothly, man. So we ain't going to waste no more time. Shout out to all the good humans. Let's jump right into it. All right. The book Black Rednecks and White Lip. What?
The instrumental use of the history of slavery today also underlies the claim that slavery grew out of racism. For most of its long history, which includes most of the history of the human race, slavery was largely not the enslavement of racially different people, for the simple reason that only in recent centuries has either the technology or the wealth existed to go to another continent to get slaves and transport them en masse across an ocean. People were enslaved because they were vulnerable, not because of how they looked. The peoples of the Balkans were enslaved by fellow...
Oh, that's deep right there, brother. Say it again. People were enslaved because they were vulnerable, not how they looked. So he's saying color didn't matter. That's what I got from that, right? I'm trying to pay very, 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 very close attention to this.
Vulnerable, not because of how to go to another continent to get slaves and transport them en masse across an ocean. People were enslaved because they were vulnerable, not because of how they looked. The peoples of the Balkans were enslaved by fellow Europeans, as well as by the peoples of the Middle East, for at least 6 centuries before the first African was brought to the Western Hemisphere. Before the modern era, by and large, Europeans enslaved other Europeans, Asians enslaved other Asians, Africans enslaved other Africans.
I knew that.
And the indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere enslaved other indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere. Slavery was not based on race, much less on theories about race. Only relatively late in history did enslavement across racial lines occur on such a scale as to promote an ideology of racism that outlasted the institution of slavery itself. Wherever a separate people were enslaved, they were disdained or despised, whether they were different by country, religion, caste, race, or tribe.
Money. That's what I'm getting from this. Money. Again, man, when you look at these photos like this, you know, photos can be very deceiving. I'm not a gullible person. I told y'all, I try to stay away from politics, but I know about politics. I just don't like the division that they bring. But a lot of black people in my neighborhood growing up, we were taught to think one way, but when you get older, you start to see things differently for yourself. I wasn't one of them type of people. I always thought outside of the box to look at things from different ways or whatever. So what I'm trying to say is, I don't know if anything in here is going to surprise me, just because I know people minds the way they work and what they're capable of doing when money is involved.
Whether they were different by country, religion, caste, race, or tribe. In East Africa, the Maasai were feared slave raiders, and other African tribes, either alone or in conjunction with Arabs, enslaved their more vulnerable neighbors. As late as 1891, it was reported that Manyuema slavers had demoralized surrounding tribes, destroying crops, and famine reigned everywhere. Even in the early 20th century, Abyssinians were still raiding other Africans and carrying off slaves. It was 1922 before the British had gained sufficient control in Tanganyika to stamp out slavery there. Arabs were the leading slave raiders in East Africa, ranging over an area larger than all of Europe.
Look at that.
The total number of slaves exported from East Africa during the 19th century has been estimated to be at least 2 million. The form in which the story of slavery has reached most people today has been along the lines of the best-selling book and widely watched television miniseries Roots by Alex Haley. Challenged on the historical accuracy of Roots, Haley said, "I tried to give my people a myth to live by." This instrumental use of history, or purported history, is open to the same objections as other instrumental myth-making. Despite the
That's what I be talking about when I watch these movies, it's like if you really, really, really want to educate yourself, you got to put the time in. You can't rely on somebody else to do it, because you can be led down the wrong path. This brother seems very highly educated. My goodness, the amount of time and research you have to dedicate yourself to present videos like this is just amazing. I just feel like a lot of people, when they hear the truth, it bothers them. You know what I mean? Because they were taught one thing. You taught one thing and then you learn another, and you're just like confused and lost and mad. This is pretty crazy though.
Same objections as other instrumental myth-making. Despite the impression created by Roots, during the era of the massive slave trade from West Africa, a white man was more likely to catch malaria in Africa than to catch slaves himself. The average life expectancy of a white man in the interior of sub-Saharan Africa at that time was less than 1 year. By and large, men from Europe or the Western Hemisphere came to the coasts of Africa, bought their slaves, and left as soon as possible. Even so, the death rates among the white crews of the ships carrying slaves to the Western Hemisphere were as high as the death rates among the slaves themselves. It was only much later, after quinine and other medical measures enabled Europeans to survive.
And see, I can understand that number though, because it's like, back then, why would they kill the slave when they can, pretty much have them do whatever they need them to do or whatever? So I can understand that number there, why there were more slaves surviving,
Much later, after quinine and other medical measures enabled Europeans to survive where there were tropical diseases, was it possible for them to invade Africa in force and establish empires there. But by then, the Atlantic slave trade had already been ended. During the era of that trade, Africa was largely ruled by Africans, who established the conditions under which slave sales took place. The crew of a slave ship was in no position to defy African rulers and their armies by going out across the land and capturing people willy-nilly. The stronger African peoples captured and enslaved the weaker peoples. The same pattern found over the centuries in Europe, Asia, the Western Hemisphere, and Polynesia. In Nyasaland, the Ngoni and Yao swaggered over and terrorized other tribes. In Uganda, the Baganda made life miserable for their neighbors. And the Nyoro and Hima of Anko enslaved Toro women and children. The Tutsi dominated the Hutu in Rwanda. The Maasai lorded it over the Kikuyu and Kamba. And the latter, in turn, held the Indorobo in a kind of serfdom. It was precisely the fact that Europeans, except for the Portuguese, seldom participated in the raids that captured and enslaved Africans that enabled most people in Europe and the Americas to remain oblivious to the traumatic experience that this was, with some Africans committing suicide to avoid capture and wives being whipped as they tried to cling to their husbands or children.
Now, boy, now listen. I know Kanye West had got so much crap for when he said that slavery was a choice. And I think it's mainly because it was Kanye. Like when he said that, the shock value was like, boom. I was like, oh. But what he just said is that people was they would rather take their lives than become a slave. And I think when Kanye West said it, it was the way he said it. Because I know this is what he was trying to say. He was saying slavery was a choice. What he was trying to say is, I would rather have taken my own life, self-deleted myself, than become a slave. And he was saying that that was the choice. Like people be like, you became a slave because you stayed alive, which is still crazy. Like that death is the only choice, the only other choice, which is just crazy. And that's why everybody lost their minds. Like what he just said, though, the way he said it, it's crazy, man. People, again, I feel like people could have a problem with this video, but not have problem with all the black on black crime. I'm a real person, y'all. I'm a real person from South Central LA. Grew up around violence, guns, gangs, all that stuff. It wasn't, and I can truly say this, and all my homeboys, all of them will say this as well. It wasn't a white person in sight when there was violence going on. Only white people in sight was when the cops showed up. And hell, some of them was black. All I'm saying is we got to do better, people. We got to. I'm a real person. I'm gonna get back to the video. I want to speak my mind on this. I'm a real person. Been surrounded by so much stuff growing up. And I made it out the hood. Growing up, I had a choice. Join a gang, do drugs, just all that stuff. I chose to stay away, try to play sports. I used to try to stay at school as long as possible. Like school was over, I would stay there and play basketball with some friends until it got dark. And then I would walk home. Nobody really messed with me because I knew a lot of people. A lot of people who were into gangs were people I went to school with. I knew their parents, but their parents went to high school with my parents. So there's a choice. A lot of people choose wrong because it's easy to. Sorry, Thomas.
To the traumatic experience that this was, with some Africans committing suicide to avoid capture and wives being whipped as they tried to cling to their husbands or children. Historian David Breon Davis pointed out that Europeans had little contact with the actual process of enslavement, and that as late as 1721, the Royal African Company asked its agents to investigate the modes of enslavement in the interior. Europeans typically saw only the end results, enslaved people being offered for sale on the coast. It was much the same story in the Ottoman Empire, where those who bought slaves had no idea what these slaves had been through before. The unique position of the Western world in the history, and especially the destruction of slavery, need not imply that there was unanimity within the West on this institution.
Unanimity.
In addition to whites who defended the enslavement of Africans on racial grounds, or who opposed general emancipation on social grounds, there were many whites, and even blacks, who defended slavery as a matter of self-interest as slave owners. Although most black owners of slaves in the United States were only nominal owners of members of their own families, there were thousands of other blacks in the antebellum South who were commercial slave owners, just like their white counterparts. An estimated 1/3 of the free persons of color in New Orleans were slave owners.
My only question with this is, were black people becoming slave owners to protect slaves, is what I'm saying. That's what I'm trying to figure out with this. It gets deep, y'all. It gets deep. It gets real deep. And when the truth comes out, people get emotional and they let their emotions take over what's being put right in front of them. I'm not one of those people. I don't. And for if you're wondering, if you're new to this channel and you're wondering, I don't lean left or right. I'm not one of those guys. All right. I'm a person who based my stuff on facts and the truth. So,
And thousands of these slave owners volunteered to fight for the Confederacy during the Civil War. Black slave owners were even more common in the Caribbean.
wow.
In short, there were many defenders of slavery in the West, even in the 19th century. And outside the West, slavery was too widely accepted to require defense. No other nation ended slavery in the same way as the United States did, and few ended it after so short a struggle, as history is measured. How and why did slavery end in most of the world?
Yeah.
There were two major processes. Over the centuries, as more and more territories around the world consolidated into nation-states with their own armies and navies, raiding those territories to capture and enslave the people who lived within them became more hazardous in itself, and also risked military retaliation against the countries from which the raiders came. Thus, more and more peoples became off-limits to slave raiders over time. Put differently, the areas which remained subject to slave raiding over the centuries were primarily those where the people lived in smaller or weaker societies. Such societies continued to exist where it was difficult, for geographic or other reasons, to consolidate large areas under one government. This was true of the Balkans, the backwaters of Asia, and much of sub-Saharan Africa. By the early modern era, sub-Saharan Africa, with its numerous and severe geographic handicaps, was one of the last remaining areas from which vast numbers of people could be enslaved.
Now look, I ain't gonna sit up here and be no fool and say, like, if I was a slave, I would have chosen to, like, self-delete myself, or I would have done that before I became. I ain't gonna do that. Sit up there and say that, because you don't know what you would have done back in the day. All I'm saying is, if you were a owner, you're evil, because the stuff that they were doing to the men, the women, the kids, all that stuff, it's just crazy. It's just crazy. I don't care what color you are, but if you are a black slave owner and you weren't doing it to try to protect them or and you were just really treating them like a slave, that's like the definition of black on black crime right there. I just, I'm 42 years old. The stuff I've seen in my life, I had a rough childhood, rough. Sometimes I still question, like, how did I make it out? How did I not get shot or something just because I was around it so much? But, like, as you get older and you start to look to your left and your right, and you look at people and what they're doing in life compared to where you're trying to be in life, you find your circle getting really, 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 really small. Because some people are in your life for the wrong reasons. If it ain't nobody trying to help you succeed in life, and I don't mean like give you things. I'm more so talking about just inspire, motivate. If you don't have those type of people around you, why are they around you? When I look at black on black crime, like me, I'm a type of person that I used to say it, not a lot, but I used to say it, but I hate the N word. I hate saying it. I hate hearing it. I hate it. You know, some people will say, you know, we took that word and we reversed it and we made it. Nah, I try to stay away from that word. Just off the simple fact of the true meaning behind it, how degrading it was. I hate it. And we get so mad when people say it to us, but we say it to each other. Told y'all I'm a real person. I'm real. I don't lean left. I don't lean right. I can't stand any of the presidents we've ever had because I know they're all puppets. You know what I mean? I know they are. Somebody's up there pulling the strings. But what I'm saying is we got to be better humans in this world, man. Is the violence going to stop? No, it ain't. It ain't. Because people are too lazy, too jealous, too envious. You know what I mean? Instead of getting off your you know what and going to work for it, you rather take it from somebody who worked hard for it. That's the issue I got with people who look like me. And you see it. You see it. I could put on a nice suit, go walking in a bad neighborhood, and people gonna laugh and be trying to clown me, not knowing I'm there to like help them. You know what I mean? That's how it is. That's how it is. It was a few things in here that, you know, made me go, oh, but I wasn't prepared to be like, I mean, I felt like nothing was really gonna shock me. Because all you gotta do is look at today. All you gotta do is look at it. I hate what we're doing to each other. We get so mad when other races do things to us. But when we do it to each other, it seemed to be okay. Man, y'all foolish. Foolish. Hey, again, appreciate you guys coming over. Comment below if y'all want me to check out any more videos like this. This is I normally just react to music, but it's been so difficult that I'm just checking out other videos now, man. I'm just watching stuff I want to watch and give my opinion on it and see how it goes. But yeah, man, I love everybody. I do, first and foremost. You know, I told somebody at the gym, I said, I should be the last person wearing a shirt like this. Just be a good human. I should be like wanting to yell out, F the world. But I made it out the hood and I'm trying to inspire people. Peace out.